Hey, how's it going? This is MC and Mad Talk the Civil War. It's episode 13, Second Manassas, also known as Second Bull Run. How are you doing today, MC?
I'm tolerable, barely, but I'm tolerable.
I want to open a little bit about your rant to begin with because I thought you brought up some great points in that. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, or do you want to just stay on the educational route like we've been
Well,
doing?
it's up to you. I mean, I have no problems obviously talking about it. I mean, it amazes me, and this is all right. Yesterday, Atema, the Hun, basically chastised me, and to an extent, she's right. All right, about my rant about sticks, right? Commenting about the military, and basically what it pointed out to me was that sometimes when I'm in that mode, right, people are listening to the they're not listening to what I'm saying, they're just listening to the emotion being emoted from it, right? That's carrying over. And the context then becomes what was actually being said. Because one of the things that I was trying to point out during that rant on sticks was he doesn't have the experience. He doesn't understand how the military functions, how the military culture works. He doesn't understand uh, how to rate a military, whether or not a military is actually going to be an effective military, or whether or not a military is not going to be an effective military. Now,
Yeah,
the
no, and
reason
it seems that the Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, they don't know shit either. I thought they had military experts that they fucking
well
go to. Maybe one of
they
them
went
would have been like, hey, half the country, Lee
they
is
they
beloved by,
they went into
like,
it and they find people that want to sit up there and take the piss out of a successful general, and especially someone like Robert E. Lee, who to them is a controversial figure because, and only because, all right, he fought for the Confederacy. All right, they don't talk
yeah,
about the man's humanity. They don't talk about the man's abilities. All right, they talk about, well, this was a bad strategy by the Confederacy, which is just absolute nonsense. Okay, um, well, he was too worried about the his Virginia. Yeah, because that's how he viewed his true nation. All right, this was the point of the Civil War in a lot of ways. Is there was still very much an attachment to the state rather than to the federal government or to the union as a whole. People tend to forget this.
well,
Now, in
not
the
only
South, it was magnified mainly because of the aristocratic nature of many of the Southerners, especially the elite. But it wasn't the only thing. Go ahead. What you
Yeah,
were
I
going to
was
say
gonna
something?
talk. Yeah, I was gonna talk about. They don't even mention the fact that after the war, he didn't mention a thing about it. He kept his damn mouth shut unless he was in private, pretty much, or at a reunion with the soldiers. And he also became the president of what was to become Washington Lee University. I mean, he had a successful life after the war as well. Unlike Jefferson Davis, who pretty much wallowed in self pity until the day he died.
Right. I mean, it's the thing about Lee, all right, that people forget is the very fact that Lee decided to surrender and completely surrender, an attempt to re-heal the nation from a civil war. Now, I don't think anybody even can comprehend today just how difficult that actually is, how difficult a position that is, that you're dealing with there. It's it's silly, all right, and to go out of your way to attack the man, right, who did more, all right, to heal the scars of the Civil War, all right, than pretty much anybody else because he was in the position to do it, all right, takes away the very humanity of the man. And it doesn't recognize his strategic genius. Now, Lee did a lot of things, all right. You could sit up there and say, well, it was stupid to do X, Y, or Z. Okay, and he
Pickett's
got lucky.
charge, anybody?
Well, I mean, it's not just Pickett's charge. There's a lot of things he could have that he got away with. But the thing is, and we'll talk about the Pickett's charge and so forth a little bit later. But the thing is that Lee wasn't in a position. The South wasn't in a position not to take those kinds of risks. The idea that the Washington Post had that they could just that the South could fight a completely defensive war and just keep falling back as a strategy that it somehow would have worked. It's just utter nonsense. It is just utter nonsense.
Yeah,
Right?
I agree. I agree with your assessment and your rant. A year and a half is all I would have given him if Lee didn't do what he did. I completely agree with your assessment. Other than when you kind of swiped at me, but you do that every rant. I'm used to it.
I wasn't really swipe. The only thing I swiped at you about was you do the same thing when you talk about Lincoln.
Yeah, but nobody brings up the bad parts of Lincoln. Everybody's like, "Oh, Lincoln."
Lots of people bring up the bad parts of Lincoln. What the hell are you talking about?
But
you're on the SJW side of when they talk about Lincoln. All you have to do is ever just listen to what they were saying about Lincoln. What are you talking about?
Oh, don't call me an SJW, all right? Come on, I thought we were friends. What the fuck, man?
I can hit below the belt too, pal.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I really did agree with your assessment. If you want to talk about this some more, we can, or we could dive right into second Bull Run or second Manassas, whichever one you want to call it.
Okay, well, I have now lost. There it is. There we are. Now I'm happy. Let's go ahead and dive into this. All right, because the first thing I want to mention though is, okay, this comes on the heels of.
And this is a short show. This is the one we only do for an hour. I only need somewhat quiet for like an hour.
This comes on the heels of the disastrous Peninsula campaign. Now, at this point in time, to be honest, I thought that Lincoln had totally replaced McClellan, but that's not what he did. What he did was he actually said, "Okay, McClellan, you have the Army of the Potomac. We're going to put it over here, and then you're still in charge of the quote unquote Army of the Potomac, but I'm creating an Army of Virginia." He called it the Army of Virginia, and he then started taking troops.
Cunt.
then he started taking troops away from McClellan and placing them under, in other words, reducing the force that McClellan basically had, right, and started placing them under General Pope,
who is the commander in charge of this battle. It is John Pope who's in command. Forces are the Army of Virginia, Army of the Potomac, and the Kanawha Division. I hope I said that right. 77,000 troops under Pope's command. I will not get into the casualties until we're done, but there's a big difference in casualties. Confederates, Robert E. Lee, Army of Northern Virginia, 50,000 is their strength. This all kicks off on August 8th, 1862. Stonewall Jackson's forces crossed the Rappahannock River just north of Gordonsville to head off Union General Pope. All right.
Okay. Now, right here is something people have got to recognize. Right. Jackson has been ordered by Lee, right, to make a foray north, and the reason that he's able to do this is he wants to draw the battle, but what's more is he understands that McClellan is a wuss. He understands McClellan because of meeting him in the Peninsula Campaign and how he reacted in the Peninsula Campaign. He understands that McClellan will not support Pope. He will delay, he will obfuscate, he won't provide him support. Now, why is this important? It's important because what he does with Jackson is he throws Jackson out there in the wind. Okay, this is a maneuver that if they had thrown it against Grant, and I know I've said this before, but if they had done this against Grant, Jackson would not have come back. His entire force and himself would have been completely destroyed. That's how far basically he was pushing him out front of the rest of the main Confederate forces.
I know we don't have any proof either way, but do you think Jackson kind of argued with Lee about this, or did he think it was a good idea? He was quite aggressive himself.
Well, okay, this is something that Lee did bring, is he did bring an aggressive nature to the forefront. And yes, Jackson was an aggressive commander but at the same time, it's something that I think they both innately knew. You can't win this battle on the defense, right? Jackson had already understood this. I mean, you can take a look at his Shenandoah campaign, and he's running around all over the Shenandoah, all right, without being stopped. That he has the concept of, I can't be pinned down, all right, and he demonstrated that he has the ability to move his men quickly and rapidly, and his men will follow him. This is important. Now, Jackson was very much a disciplinarian, and he got a lot out of his men that most people would look at that and go, "Oh my goodness, how the hell can you do that? How can you get these guys to move and fight and do all these things?" Well, because I mean, he was a disciplinarian asshole. Okay.
Well, yeah, he would do. They'd be forced marches, right? So you got people behind you with bayonets. If you slow down, you're getting stabbed.
In many ways, he was very much the predecessor of another American general, Patton. Patton's men didn't like him either. Okay, but at the same time, they followed Patton because they knew Patton would give them victories. And Patton also was very much a disciplinarian and kind of an ass. All right, so but he's able to. Lee knows this. Lee knows that he can trust Jackson to go up north, right, and do as much damage as possible. Okay, Jackson is now on the march, and the first thing he does is he goes around. He basically does a flank around Pope, all right, and hits a major supply depot for Pope. All right,
Why didn't Pope have
a
cavalry screen? He should have seen Jackson's forces. I know it's not the entirety of the Army of Northern Virginia, but he had a sizable force underneath him, didn't he?
Okay, well, that's a good question, and let's pull up this map. Can you see this map? Let me hide that. Okay. This is some of the movement later on. All right. Now you got to remember they were completely out of touch. Two things are happening. One, you asked the question.
I was muted. Damn it! I was talking the whole time. I can see both maps. You need to actually click on it in your folder. I thought you were hearing me. I was fucking muted. Damn it! Rookie mistake there, and I've been doing this for 2 years.
Is this can you see it
now? No, I still see both maps. Like, for some reason, it's not enlarging on the screen. It's just showing your folder there.
I think I chose the wrong thing. Okay, hold on a second.
All right. Let me go check the chat real quick.
Here, how's this?
Just a second. Yeah, there we go. All right, I'll present you to everybody now. There you go.
Okay. Now, you were asking about the cavalry. Well, first of all, Lee also is using his cavalry initially to screen Jackson, but also to keep in contact with Jackson. And this is where Jackson is going to end up. The initial depot that he hit, I believe, was here in Centersville, right? This is Jackson's movement. He comes here, hits Centersville, comes back down here. All right. Now, where you ask, where's the cavalry? Okay. Well, here's a good portion of it. Right here, of the Union cavalry. And this is actually,
so
if you ever watched the movie.
Well, real quick, they're watching Longstreet then, and why Jackson moves all the way around to their flank.
They're watching the gaps. They're watching Thoroughfare Gap.
But go ahead. What movie were you talking about before I cut you off?
In the movie Gettysburg, there's a scene in there where Buford talks. They mention that he held it at Thoroughfare Gap. All right, this is what they're talking about.
Gods and Generals is better, but I do own them both.
All right, but you'll hear them talk about this. All right, this is the battle that they're talking about at Second Manassas. This is where the cavalry was at the beginning of where this happens. Now the depot at Centerville is destroyed, right? And unfortunately, Porter doesn't know how to use cavalry to find Jackson. Okay, and the main reason is, to be honest, what he was planning to do in this case, what Pope's initial plan, you can tell, is to prevent Jackson from escaping. He's not really worried about Longstreet or the rest of the Corps, all right? And he's not thinking, for some reason, that he thinks Jackson has been detailed to go to the Shenandoah, right? He thinks that it's another Shenandoah campaign, that it isn't a movement of the entire Army of Northern Virginia. And this is a major mistake. Okay,
so go ahead. They didn't respect Lee at that point then, right?
Well, Pope didn't. Pope isn't.
Even after Lee thoroughly licked McClellan?
Didn't thoroughly lick him. That's what I've told you that before. If he thoroughly licked him, how did the Army of Potomac still have 80,000 men left?
Fair enough. All right, go ahead and continue.
Okay, but he's lost when he immediately marches to Centerville to try and get Jackson. Right, he can't find Jackson. He doesn't know where he went, so he starts looking around. Right, you can tell from the movement here, he was totally lost trying to figure out where Jackson is. Jackson has moved all of his forces on nice high ground here. All right, and this is where the first day's battle is going to take place. And at this point in time, Longstreet and the rest of Lee's forces have not shown up into the battle area. But Jackson has prepared very strong defensive positions here. Now, at this point in time, once again, what do you have? You have the Union forces saying, "Okay, we can get rid of Jackson. I'm going to ask for help, all right, to make sure that I can seal off some of these areas." And Porter, he does ask for help. Pope does ask for help, all right, saying that I need some help to deal with Jackson. Can you send me some troops? And of course, McClellan is like, no, I can't give you any more troops. I've got to secure Washington, right? And this shows you the lack of generalship of McClellan. One thing McClellan never understood was movement. All right, he could build an army, but he never knew how to move an army. Right? I mean, from point A to point B is fine, but not understanding what you can do versus what your enemies can do in a combat situation or in a march situation to get from point A to point B is definitely a problem.
Do you think it's that? Because I'm more under the impression, especially after he ends up leaving the army and running for president. But that comes later. But I'm under the impression that he was pissed. He got half his troops already taken, and he's like, "No, I'm keeping what army I have left." But what he should have did, if they wanted to win, and not have a second Bull Run, because it ends up almost the same way, other than they don't run, and there's not a bunch of civilians watching. But it does end up bad for the Union. But if McClellan would have came with his force, they would have crushed the Confederacy right then and there, perhaps.
Well, it depends. The battle wouldn't have been like it was, obviously, right? But at the same time, and yes, McClellan was in a pouty mood. Okay, he had been castigated. His name was being trashed. Lincoln, in my opinion, Lincoln probably should have removed him. But then again, one of the problems that Lincoln had is McClellan was still very popular with his men for whatever reason. All right, McClellan retained the popularity of his men because he made them into an army. They did respect him. It's one of the sad things that he couldn't utilize it, right? That he just didn't have the talent for it. And it's quite unfortunate in that regard. Right now, As you see on this battle, what you're seeing here is a warning, because you're starting to see Longstreet on the 29th come up. Okay, and yes, the cavalry initially is able to stop them until they hold on line, but these are just cavalry, small cavalry divisions. They don't have the ability to stop an entire corps, and this is Longstreet's entire corps that's moving from White Plains. Okay, when they pull back, Porter is told by Pope to make an attack, to make an attack here, and he's like, I can't attack. That's an entire corps. I don't have the forces. and Pope actually is very upset with Porter about this, because he refuses to. He's not getting help from frickin' McClellan. Porter is telling him, "You're out of your friggin' mind, because this is the entire force. It's Longstreet." He's refusing to believe it's Longstreet in this first day of battle.
Why? If the cavalry's telling me it's Longstreet's whole corps, I'm telling the cavalry to pull back, and we're gonna set up a fucking line of battle, right?
Because in the fog of battle, until you learn to trust your commanders and which ones you can trust to give you accurate battlefield information, okay, and until you develop the skills, right, to know where to place the reliability of information, and even then it can be wrong, okay, but until you get to that point, you're not prepared mentally to engage in battle. You're just not. It sounds kind of silly. It sounds kind of stupid, but these are still generals and still people that are feeling out their way in the kind of roles that they have, because they've never had these roles in the past.
Well, do we know what Jackson was able to take from the depot? Was it arms and ammunition? Was it shoes?
Well,
What
it was
was
food.
it?
Basically, it was a major supply depot. They had it all there. They had shoes. They had food. They had ammunition, and because he couldn't take it all, naturally, he burned most of it.
Oh man, they could have used them shoes. Just saying.
Well, shoes wear out, especially when you're marching 50 miles all the time. With Jackson's corps, his people definitely needed shoes, because they were constantly running everywhere. The term "shoe leather express" definitely applied to Jackson's troops.
Oh yeah, definitely. Okay, I'm looking. On August 9th, Nathaniel Banks' Union's forces managed several victories before being driven back by Stonewall Jackson. So that's what's showing on the map right there, right?
That's Banks down here. All right, these small little
Oh,
battles.
okay.
These small little battles are just okay. They're talking about battles, but they're not really battles. They're just skirmishes. Okay, it's what's in here. We come in contact with one another. Shots are fired back and forth, but you got to remember, Jackson isn't trying to force the Yankees back, right? He's trying to get around them, and so you end up with a series of small little engagements, right? That are not intended to. They're not intended to be a set piece battle. They're just intended for us, for being in the Confederates and for the Union to find each other. Okay, where is this other person? Okay,
Yeah.
Jackson's over here. This is how they know where Jackson generally is, but they lose sight of where he's going. Like I said, they think Pope thinks that he's running to the Shenandoah and getting ready for another Shenandoah campaign. All right, and he basically leaves Centerville undefended, which gets it basically destroyed. So the idea that somehow he was going to be able to, uh, you know, not watch what Jackson was doing. Once the depot there is hit, once Jackson hits that depot, okay, at this point in time, Pope looks at this and says, I have the chance, and he does, all right, to destroy Jackson in detail, all right, basically take part of Lee's army, Jackson's corps, and destroy it in detail. And that's what he's preparing to do. He's like, okay, I can lock this, but he's not cognizant, and he's not aware enough to understand that this is a movement of Lee's entire movement. That this is part of Lee's plan. This is what Lee wants to happen.
Yeah, Jackson is just trying to put it like you would, fix the enemy, right? Get them focused on him. That way, Longstreet and Lee can come forward.
Pope wants to fix the enemy. He thinks he can fix Jackson, which he can. All right, he can outnumber Jackson, then he can destroy Jackson. What he's ignoring the fact that Lee, this is part of Lee's strategy. This is Lee's plan. All right, let him think that Jackson there. As long as Jackson's able to hold, I'm good. All right, because then I can come up and hit them where they least expect it with more power in the area of the battlefield than they're prepared for. And let me see if I can get to the first. If I have this thing for the second day's battle.
But okay, so why couldn't they take out Jackson though? Because like you said, he's up in the air pretty much. He's on his own at this point. Day one of the battle. Why didn't they just use overwhelming force?
Because they didn't have it. They didn't have it there yet. Remember,
okay.
Remember, there's two things going on, right? He's telling Porter to come up, all right, and support him to take out Jackson, right? Porter's telling him, I'm already got units in front of me from Longstreet, so I'm not moving. Okay. McClellan has refused to send help down to take out Jackson. This is all the first day of battle, once they found them, all right? And once the battle was engaged. So basically, he's now fully engaging. In this first day, on the 29th, he's fully engaging Jackson here. And Jackson and the Union forces that he has available, while it's not enough to drive Jackson off of this plateau, it is enough to seriously harm him. At this point in time, both sides are losing the equivalent amount of men in this battle.
Yeah. I mean, I would assume so. Like you said, Jackson's on his own at this point. He's got to hold, or he's going to be captured or killed.
Yes.
Although he's got plenty of ammunition and brand new Yankee rifles, so that's nice.
Well, he does have plenty of ammo, and that is true. He does have plenty of powder because they took what powder they could to extra supply themselves, and they got plenty of food, and they're fed. And what's more, is they're fresh because they've been in position for a while.
Which is weird for Jackson's troops, really.
Well, it's unusual that they start a battle not running into the battle, that they're actually waiting for the battle to start around them. Okay, let me stop this and then go to another section of this.
All right. Well, I'll look at the timeline real quick. Okay. August 11th. So that's 2 days later. General Jackson pulls his troops back across the Rappahannock for fear of arriving Union reinforcements. Says on here the 13th, Lee orders Longstreet to head towards Gordonsville to strengthen the Confederate presence there. That seems a little bit off by your map. No, okay, so it's not off by your map? Because I thought Longstreet was already headed forward.
That map is later on. That shows you the final movements of these forces, not the initial movement.
Oh, okay.
You got to remember, Jackson hasn't hit Centerville yet.
Okay, all right. Okay, yeah, this is a good map. And Jackson does have quite a few forces there. And then Longstreet and Hood are coming in. I don't know. It doesn't look like the Union is outnumbering them at this point.
Well, you got to remember, this is the first day of the battle. All right, and this is the first units. These are small units of Longstreet's corps. Okay, and this is what Porter is seeing. He's seeing that this isn't just Jackson's corps, all right, that it's also Longstreet's corps, and the rest of Longstreet's corps has to be coming in. And that's what he's trying to warn Pope of. All right. In addition to that, all right, in addition to that aspect, Pope then can't convince McClellan that it's also Longstreet, all right, because then they would know that they don't have to worry about Washington. It would reduce the ability of him to hang on to those troops in Washington.
Hey, Fighting Joe Hooker's at this battle.
Huh? A lot of people are at this battle for names you should recognize. Reynolds is at this battle. All right.
Yeah.
Reno is at this battle. Kearney is at this battle. These are all people that are play roles in American history. Well, not so much Reynolds because he dies at Gettysburg, but
F. Lee, is that Lee's son?
I don't think so.
I know Lee's sons fought in the war.
Yeah, but he dies. I don't think that's his son. It could be, but I don't think.
Okay, all right. But go ahead and explain this map a little bit.
Okay, so what Pope has done is Pope has finally figured out where Jackson is, and he's ordering attacks all along Jackson's line. And you can see throughout this entire line here that what they have is the high ground. They got the high ground, and what's more is they're behind trees. All right, they've got plenty of trees around them. All right, in order for the Pope's forces to come through, they got to come up into the open of this railroad cut. All right, and launch these attacks in an open field, and which they're doing is Pender right here.
Yeah. Well, no, and I'd just like to add, Jackson's been sitting there for a while. There's no way his troops weren't cutting down trees to build.
They're in heavily fortified. They're in fortified defenses. Pender, and that shows some of the artillery here, but Pender has artillery as well. You can see how much effect that they have, how much coverage they have from the artillery. All right. Now, this part of the engagement, Longstreet, you're seeing movement. Notice both movement coming together. This portion of it, as he wants to swing, what Pope wants to do is he wants to swing here, right, and basically flank and cut off the retreat of Jackson. All right. This is prevented by Longstreet's corps as it comes up, and they basically engage in what for all intents and purposes turns into a meeting engagement. And you can see it's in the latter part of the evening. Notice this is between 5 and 7 p.m.
Yeah, so it's going to end up getting dark. They usually stopped at that point unless they were crazy like Jackson and did a night assault.
Right. Now, at this point in time, Porter, who's basically down here, and these are some of his forces as well, he knows that he's engaging Longstreet. He knows Longstreet's coming up. Now, Longstreet isn't right. Longstreet's not as close as he thinks he is, but he is. The rest of Longstreet's corps isn't as close as he thinks he is. But at the same time, and at this point in time, Lee is like, drive them now. He wants movement by Longstreet to hurry up into this battle. All right, because he sees a chance of trapping Pope completely, right, and destroying him. Lee wants to totally and utterly destroy Pope.
That would have been nice, but it doesn't end up happening. But I'll tell you guys, the casualty rate
comes a lot closer. It really does. All right, the people realize, but what you're seeing here are the initial attacks. As Kearney's initial assault actually starts to have an effect. In order to brace this assault, he has to move troops from his left, what is his right flank, the left flank of the Confederates, all right, from the Union perspective, to help reinforce this area. All right, that this is important because it almost falters. This almost works. If these forces weren't here, okay, the swing to the left would have finished Jackson.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm looking down here by the Manassas Gap Railroad, Dr. Jones. He's right here on a roadway, so there's movement possible. Why doesn't he swing in and attack Reynolds in the flank, and then have Kemper keep Reynolds busy with a frontal assault?
Why?
That seems like a good idea to me, but then again, I'm asking you because you know more.
Where's Porter at? Porter's down below.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's there as a defensive maneuver to prevent Porter from coming in and swinging in. That's what he's there for. That's why he doesn't come through. He'd have been turning his back to the enemy and gotten caught in a pincher movement and been destroyed.
Okay, see, that's why I was asking you. Just looking at the map, it looks like he could swing down that road for quick movement and actually hit him in the flank. But yeah.
Well, and he possibly could have, but he would have. You got to remember, he's the end of the flank. At which point your flank then can get rolled up on. You don't do that. you don't send your flanks into movements like that unless you've got the enemy totally surrounded. And in this case, he doesn't have the enemy totally surrounded. You still got Porter and Banks in these areas on this side. That's what you got to remember.
Okay. All right. Okay. Look back at the timeline again here. All right. So, Union General Pope is forced back over the Rappahannock due to growing Confederate pressure. So they do start to push Pope back on August 18th. On August 22nd, Jeb Stuart's cavalry raid brings him to Union General Pope's rear. He makes a swinging movement all the way around Pope's army. That's pretty impressive. But then again, it is Jeb. You know, Jeb Stuart was pretty impressive.
It's a cavalry raid, nothing more.
Yeah, but he was a cavalryman. That's what he was good at. Come on, give him credit where credit's due, MC.
All right, but what does this provide? Why is this important?
It just said that on the timeline. I was going through the timeline.
The reason that movement's important is it does two things. One, it keeps the Union forces off balance, but two, it means that the Confederates are fully aware of the force disposition of the Union. This is why cavalry was so critical to Lee. All right, is as long as they're in contact with the enemy and they're doing things like this, right? They're disturbing the enemy's movements, all right, to a large extent. But also the real advantage is that this information is flowing back to Lee. He knows where the Union forces of Pope are. Pope at this point, to be honest, could have done several different things. Pope could have consolidated his forces and said, you know, Jackson, stay right where you're at. I'm just gonna put just a small little screening force here to keep you occupied, right? Doing like little movements back here to think that you think that we're prepping for the attack, and I could have swung my entire force straight south right into Richmond.
You would have ran head on into Longstreet though.
Longstreet was to the west.
Okay, well, wasn't Lee with
Lee would have repositioned him, of course, but which Pope doesn't do. Okay, but the fact that the cavalry unit is letting Lee know, since Lee knows that Pope can't do that because his forces aren't prepared to do that, he knows he can move Longstreet and the rest of his corps into position.
Yeah, that's what the cavalry was really for, was information and raids, you know. Yeah. But, okay, anything else on this map you want to dive into, or do you want me to continue on the timeline?
Go ahead and continue with the timeline.
All right. August 25th, Stonewall Jackson begins a flanking maneuver against Pope's army. So, is that on the map that you're showing there? I don't see. Yeah. So, okay, it doesn't say what. I wish it was. I hate this timeline. I hate this timeline. That's why I didn't even source it. I really hate this timeline. But I wonder if they would have said what division he flanks, then we could actually tell. But it doesn't fucking say it.
These are the movements of the 27th through the 29th. Right. What I was showing there was the battle on the 29th of how the forces are arrayed right at this point, right here, what you were looking at on that other map. Just so we know.
Okay, right? Well, let me jump forward then, because the next day on the timeline is the 27th.
Okay.
Ewell's division is ordered to Bristol Station by Stonewall Jackson to delay Pope's arriving troops. That's pretty smart. Then on the same day, Jackson captures that supply depot at Manassas Junction.
This is right here.
And we covered that already, so I'll go to August 28th.
Right here, Manassas Junction. Right here.
The Second Battle of Bull Run is had over a 2-day period, beginning on August 28th and ending on the 30th. Confederate forces are under the command of Robert E. Lee, with Union troops directed to... Really? Why would they do that? Confederate forces are under the command of Robert E. Lee, with Union forces directed by John Pope. The battle results in a Confederate victory. Okay. But why? What do you mean directed and in command? Why are they making a differentiation?
Because Porter has an independent command and McClellan has an independent command. There's not an overall commander.
I gotcha. That makes sense why they worded it that way. All right. And yeah, so we're at the Battle of Bull Run.
So you now got to where he's done here. He's hit Manassas Junction. He's ran up through here. Right. He's put himself in a nice position where he's in the defensive positions, waiting for about a day. All right, for the attack.
Yeah, and Jackson redeploys his forces west of the old Bull Run battlefield, and this is still on the 28th. And we're going to be on the 28th here for a little bit. The second Battle of Bull Run officially begins. Confederate shelling is heard at 6:30 p.m. The action takes place around Bronner's Farm, Groveton. So the Confederates start shelling first, it sounds like.
Well, they're the ones who are in position to be able to see them in the open field. You got to remember. Here, back to this thing.
Yeah, and this isn't going to go well for the Union. If you want me to continue, I can. It's the next day because they started shelling at 6:30 at night. And this is August, so it's daylight till what, 9:30, 10? That's about all you're going to get is just like 4 hours.
It's August, so I wouldn't even say it's probably not going to be light. Well, you're going to start seeing twilight at around 8 o'clock at night. So you don't have a lot of daylight, right? I mean, it's the end of August. You got to remember this at the end of August, early September. Right?
Oh, fair enough. Yeah.
So you're starting to see the sun's coming down a little bit sooner. It's not like July, where the sun is up until 9:30, almost 10 o'clock at night. No, you're seeing at 8 o'clock or so is when it's dark. And so they start shelling because these areas are open. All right, and you're seeing the movement in these areas. All right, by the Union forces. Now, the initial artillery barrage, because the initial setup with the artillery over here. It's long distance artillery, right? And you're just shelling, for lack of a better term, what they consider hardened positions or targets of opportunity, right? Just to keep the enemy back.
And what do they usually use? So I think we should do a whole episode on Civil War weapons sometime.
An initial bombardment such as this, all right, where the enemy is far away, which is what you're seeing here. Right, is they're using solid shot. They're using just a solid shot, round ball, tossing it across. At this point in the war, they're just starting to experiment with timed fuses. They have
when they get up close is when you use grape shot, right? Which is like pretty much turning your can into a giant shotgun.
Canister fire, yeah, and the double canister. Yeah, but no, okay. That's not where. At this point, long distance artillery duels are basically with solid shot. That's what you're using.
But with the elevated position that Jackson holds, at least, they're able to shell quite far. Correct?
Oh yeah. They have command of the movement of the roadways. So going through these roadways is kind of hazardous. It's not enough to stop. It's more, but at this point in time, the shelling is harassing fire. It's not meant to do anything more than harass the troops to cause them to spread out, because movement, while it's spread out like that, slows movement down.
Yeah, because they had no walkie-talkies. That's why they lined up together and fucking charged. They had to hear their commander.
Well, there's lots of reasons why they did it. It was holdovers from the previous wars and how you had to mass troops. The reality is the weapons had become far more lethal then, which is why you have massive casualties. But that's the techniques were from the previous wars. Both sides were using the techniques from the Mexican-American War, basically.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. August 29th, Stonewall Jackson's forces hold the Stony Ridge. First contact between the two sides on this day is had at 7 a.m. Don't even get breakfast, boys. Time to kill each other. Also on the 29th, Sigil's sector is strengthened by Major General Hooker's division by 1 p.m. So it took a while for them to strengthen his position.
Right. Well, that's what they're doing. Is they're running up these roads to get in a position to get online to attack.
All right. Let's see here. August 30th, General Longstreet's force under Major General Richard Anderson
Like I said, notice before you do that, remember, at the end of that day, they've been fighting along this line this entire day. Okay, like I said, like I was saying before, Jackson's already had to move troops from this end over to here to reinforce the battle lines that have been coming up here. They're holding, but it's not an easy thing, and this is a slog through here. Okay, both sides are losing massive amounts of troops through this. Right?
Yes and no. I'm going to get to the casualty numbers, and it's quite surprising to me.
The ending battle casualties aren't going to happen because of this. At this point in time, they're given as good as they're getting. The difference is toward the end of this night, notice this time frame, you end up with Longstreet begins to arrive. And this was what Porter has been bitching at frickin' Pope about this entire time. that Longstreet's on his way. Because if you remember the previous screen that I was showing you, the previous map, it's showing you that where the cavalry was, and that the cavalry was at that gap, but instead of trying to prevent Jackson from getting out, they actually got pushed out by Longstreet from the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. And once Longstreet arrives on the battle, do you think Pope should have did a organized retreat to fall back, maybe I don't know, to Centerville?
No, he probably could have realigned his forces along this road here, and waited for Longstreet to and put himself in a position to attack. Reynolds is, instead of leaving Reynolds out here in a preparation for it. Here's the second day.
Okay, we can't see your cursor for some reason, but were you talking about the Manassas Sudley Springs Road?
Here, right along here. He probably could have realigned here, or realigned along this area here, pulled back a little bit here.
Oh, okay. And yeah, now I can see your cursor. All right.
All right. And so let me get over to the second day's battle. Well, the on 30th. What you see now is the entire arrival of Lee and Longstreet and everybody else. And you can also see what Pope has basically been trying to do. Order Porter to ignore this thing that's coming to crush him, right, and finish off Jackson. And Jackson's like, well, I'm still in high position right through here. All right, Hooker, Ricketts, Reno, they're all basically from the previous day's battle, resting, for lack of a better term. All right, they're not making assaults through these improved lines anymore, right? They're just there to try and prevent Jackson from getting away, right? And you see what's going to happen. Longstreet orders his attack all the way through here. They roll right through frickin' Porter's lines, okay? Now they've got to pull back. Now, one of the disadvantages is notice how Jackson's still in position, because Jackson really can't do anything.
Why can't Jackson come down off the position he was in?
Because he's that badly mauled.
Oh, yeah, he was there on his own for a long time.
He was there all day long fighting. All right, his troops are not at a point where they can easily move out into the attack. They just don't have the strength to do it. All right, as they push them back along this road, Longstreet starts to go, okay, let's push through the center here. This was something of a mistake. This is where Longstreet actually makes a mistake. Yes, he's pushing Reynolds. Yes, he's pushing through this area, and he's pushing through the center of the lines. All right, and it's an attempt to basically break this off, where they then could take Reno, Ricketts, and Stevenson, and cut them off from retreat.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's would have been my move though. In the last map when they got there, they had him to where, you know, after they rolled him up, they could have surrounded. Yeah, see Jones, his movements here. I mean, why didn't they hit the flank? I know Buford's out here. Send a detachment to take him out. That's one. That's one fucking. I don't even know if that's a whole division.
That's
so,
a partial, basically a partial. I think a brigade of cavalry.
Yeah, I wouldn't even worry about him. He'd be like a horsefly biting you. Yeah, you could have taken the flank of Harding, McLean, and move them all down and just make chaos in the middle with Hooker, Reynolds, Reno, Sigil.
To be honest, what I think she should have done is used Jones to blow open a hole here, right, and see whether or not you could push Anderson and some of these other late arriving units instead of here, right? Just to leave these guys here as a holding unit with Kemper and Hood, and try and drive to see if you can come here to basically take this roadway to prevent Pope from attacking or from escaping.
At this point, is there a way Pope can save this? I know I ask you that every time, you know, if the loser of the battle has a out here to where maybe they could save this. To me, it looks like he's collapsing in on himself.
No,
it's going to be a
because
bottleneck.
the troops, that's exactly what's happened. Right now, you have a mass of troops stuck together, all right, where they're not fighting. They're in each other's way. They're piled on top of each other.
God, it's like shooting fish in a barrel at that point, isn't it?
That's exactly what it was. This is the everything has come apart at the seams at this point. This is where the casualties really rise for Pope's army, is right at this point. That's why seeing this that they're all massed together here, that's why they take this opportunity to just come in here and just finish crushing them. But the reality is because he does that, is it leaves them able to use the Warrington Pike to escape.
Now, do they end up running like first Bull Run, like drop their weapons and run, or is this an orderly retreat?
No, this is kind of initially it's a panicked attack. You know, it's panicked. These guys are just falling back all along the line, right? You'll notice now that they say Jackson has moved, but if you remember correctly, Pender is part of Jackson's division, but Law is not. Law is part of Longstreet's division, right? So it's really only Pender that's left to even attempt.
And I can imagine Lee right now on the field, crush them. Do not stop until they are dead.
Right. Well, but they Reynolds here stops. Reynolds and Doubleday basically stop any kind of panic, and they start an orderly retreat along the Warrington Pike.
Yeah, because it would have ended up the same way across that Stony Bridge, as in first Bull Run.
The other advantage is Buford. Buford does a cavalry, is able to pull back here without being trapped, and what's more is because he's able to hold this position here, right? They're not able to get behind him.
Which is what Robertson's is trying to do. He's trying to cross the Lewis Ford and cut him off right at the juncture there. Yeah. Which would have been great.
It would have forced a mass panic to retreat there, and would have continued the destruction of what was left of the Army of Virginia for the Union's Army of Virginia.
Yeah, that cheeky. Yeah, I'm trying not to cuss because Sherhardy has her kids watch this. I only said one cuss word so far, so you know that's pretty good. Okay, so August 30th, Second Battle of Bull Run ends as a considerable Confederate victory, as did the first. The Confederate forces were outnumbered man to man, but managed significant casualties against the enemy. There's two more spots here, so I'll just read them. September 1st, the Battle of Chantilly, Virginia, also known as Ox Hill, takes place and ends inconclusively as both sides fail to gain initiative. Casualties number 1,300 for the Union, 800 for the Confederates. The battle marks the end of the Northern Virginia campaign that includes Second Bull Run. And on January 21st, 1863.
But that inconclusive campaign is one of the things that does finish off
this is interesting.
the idea that Lee had of totally crushing Pope.
Yeah, true, true. But this is interesting, and I'm just, we always get into the political aspect at the end. And January 21st, 1863, Union General Fritz John Porter is dishonorably discharged from the Union ranks for his conduct in the Second Battle of Bull Run. What did he do?
He told frickin' Pope to suck eggs when he told him to do that left flanking movement against Jackson, leaving his flank in the air. And he said, I'm engaging with Longstreet. All right. Pope refused to believe it. McClellan refused to believe it. And they actually court-martialed him. Now, it isn't until 1865 that they reversed that court-martial after they've captured documents from the Confederacy proving Porter wasn't lying.
Whoa, that poor guy got railroaded.
Welcome to the military. There's a lot of people who get railroaded to the military.
Jeez. Okay, so I will now say the casualty numbers, and then we'll just free flow until the end here. Casualties for the Union, 14,462. Confederate casualties, 1,096. The Confederates did 13 times as much damage to the Union than the Union did.
I think those casualties, the casualties that I've seen for the Confederacy are a lot more severe. I don't know where those numbers are. The ones that I've seen, that they show that the Confederates lost approximately 6,000, 7,000, and the vast majority of that is Jackson's troops.
Okay, I think your numbers are probably more accurate as well.
It's still a significant Confederate victory. All right. There's no doubt about that. All right. Casualties are at least 2 to 1, 3 to 1. All right.
So is this the reason there's no third Battle of Manassas? Because they're like, hey, how about we not try that again?
No, Manassas goes back and forth again and again. It's just one of those areas where it just happened to be an area that goes back and forth. But after this, it's not because there's any necessarily set piece area here. This sets the stage for what Lee is getting ready to do, which is his first attempt to invade
the Battle of Antietam, right?
Correct. The other aspect of this is at this point in time, Halleck has been promoted and is now in charge of all the Union forces.
Okay, so politically, other than that poor fucker or the poor guy, damn it, I just can't cuss or can't stop cussing. I mean, but other than him being railroaded, tell me McClellan got an earful from President Lincoln after this, because if he was there, this would have went way different.
He did, but at the same time, he can't get rid of McClellan because McClellan's troops, he's still popular with his troops. So if he would have sacked him at that point, for what reason? I mean, his troops didn't get defeated. His troops, there was no reason to sack him at that point.
Yeah, well, yeah, there was. He didn't go and back up.
There was. You're right, but they're not prepared to sack him at that point. How's that?
Okay, I guess that's more fair. McClellan seems like a real jerk, I guess, since I'm trying not to cuss on these episodes. But other than that, what politically happened in the North after another gigantic catastrophe at Bull Run?
Well, this once again is another moral defeat. The morale of the North is shrinking, all right, dramatically. Lincoln, at this point, has decided already, right, that he wants to do the Emancipation Proclamation, and he's looking for an opportunity to do it. He was hoping that a victory by Pope would have given him that opportunity, and instead he is forced to delay it.
Yeah, okay, in the South, I'm sure President Davis was elated. I'm sure the Richmond newspapers were, singing the praises of Jackson and Lee. Even though it was mainly Longstreet and Jackson, Lee showed up last. But hey, it is what it is.
You got to remember, this is a great strategic victory for Lee. You got to remember, you're really underestimating what Lee was doing here. Lee had taken some major chances by moving the Army of Northern Virginia the way it did, right, in an attempt to draw into a battle, this very battle that took place. All right, this was a strategic victory more than it was even a tactical victory. He was trying to move from a strategic standpoint, not a specific tactical point of his troops around to get Pope to do what he wanted to.
Well, don't forget. Lee was a horrible general, right? He hurt the Confederacy. Oh, Washington Post, come on.
Yeah, that's still unbelievable that they would even attempt that kind of a ridiculousness.
But this does set the stage for his foray up into the north, the first time at least, up into Maryland. But I don't know, anything else you think we should talk about politically on this, or we've hit the hour mark, and usually that's when we wrap it up.
No, I think that at this point in time we're good.
All right. Well, next we are back in the West, the Chattanooga campaign. So we get to sing the praises of great old Union General Grant.
You still seem a little bit bummed about that.
Yeah, I had to spit that out, like it got caught in my throat. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. This is MC and MADD Talk Civil War. We'll be back next weekend, I think, or are you busy?
Yep. No, next weekend's fine.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Good night. Good luck. And Washington Post, suck it.